Guys, please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Those are attending in online. Guys, please confirm to me. All of you get my voice on screen. Right. Right. Good morning, guys. Uh, check it what we completed in the last session. I think so. We are discussing about IOC containers. Am I right? IOC containers. We have started there. An IOC container. That very first question what I have asked there. In a Spring framework, what is the purpose of the container? That's a question here we have asked. Then what will be the answer for this question here? In a Spring framework, container is responsible for creating all bean objects and maintaining all bean objects and providing these bean objects into the Java applications. That's the main intention of the container. Next one is, in a Spring framework, how many types of containers are available? Two types of containers are existed. What are the two types of containers? One is a bean factory, another one is application context. All right, sir. It is a container. It will read all bean configuration details from Spring configuration file to resource object. That means bean factory container will use internally resource object to manage all the configuration details of the beans, which we provide in a Spring configuration file. All right, sir. Next one is, it will get bean configuration details from resource object and it will create bean objects on demand as per the application requirement. Here, what is the meaning of on demand here? At the time of creating container, bean objects not going to be created. But when bean objects will be created, after creating container, when we request for the bean, when we are getting bean from the container, then it will create bean object, then it will supply that bean object to the Java application. Right, some information about this bean factory. It is a base container for all the IOC containers like application context. Okay, application context, if you observe this, application context is a child interface of bean factory. Bean factory is parent and application context is what? Child. So all capabilities of bean factory are available to application context. Not only that, application context will have some advanced features also, along with all the capabilities of the bean. Next one is an outdated container. Bean factory is an outdated container. It will not support for the advanced features like advanced features of the Spring framework like internationalization, event propagation, and exception handling, data validations, and so on and so on and so on. Right. Next one is, to represent Bean factory container, Spring framework has provided a predefined interface in the form of arg.spring framework dot and beans dot something else containers dot, like all the details are existed, where bean factory is like what there an interface, and the Spring framework has provided an implementation class for bean factory, that is what there XML bean factory. That implementation class is what there XML bean factory. Again, I'm telling there, this XML bean factory was deprecated in a Spring 3.x version. In a Spring 3.x version, that XML bean factory was deprecated, but Spring 5.x version is giving support for it. But in the next feature, in the future versions, that XML bean factory may not be available. But up to 5.x version, it's okay. We can use that. Why? Because what's going to be happen there in outside market? No, Spring people wants to hide bean factory, then they want to expose more about application context. Why? Because whatever the functionalities are available with the bean factory, all functionalities are available with application context and some extra functionalities there. So Spring framework wants to expose that application context. They want to abstract bean factory. That's why direct accessibility of bean project, bean factory, they want to hide this. They want to deprecate this. They don't want to allow us to use that bean factory in the future releases. But as of now, we can use that XML bean factory and bean factory. But in the future, we may expect only application context. There is no chance of using like what there XML bean factory. No implementation classes are available for bean factory in the future releases. No, But up to now, XML bean factory is existed. Right, sir. Then how to use this bean factory actually? Bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory of resource. That means first we have to prepare resource. Right, sir. Now steps to use bean factory in Spring applications. How to use this bean factory in Spring applications? If you observe this, some steps I have given. What are the very steps here? First, to prepare resource object. Next one is what they prepare bean factory with the resource object. Get a bean object from bean factory. Access business methods from the respective bean object, not bean factory, bean object. Yeah, inside the bean only we are writing that business logic. So business methods we have to access from the bean object. All right, so then as a first step we have to create what their resource object. How to create this resource object here? What is the meaning of this resource object? If we observe this resource object, then it will be very clear that it able to provide all the configuration details which we provided in a Spring configuration files. The resource object is able to represent all the configuration details of the beans which we specified in the Spring configuration file. Bean tags we are using now, that bean tags and their properties information, everything will be provided inside the resource object. To represent resource objects, Spring Framework has provided a predefined interface in the form of resource. Resource is one of the predefined interface where it's fully qualified name is available. Package structure is available. Not required to remember that. Just directly you can understand resource. To prepare resource objects, we have to use the following implementation classes for resource interface. What are the various implementation classes are available? Class path resource. Next one is what? File system resource, URL resource, byte array resource, input stream resource. Next one is after that. Sixth one is servlet context resource. Servlet context resource. Then next one is after completion of this, the seventh one is like what there? Portlet resource, portlet context resource. These many things are available, but out of all these things, we are going to understand max these two. We are going to use max these two, and all the remaining resources are not at all required. But Spring Framework has given, if we need, then we can use them. Otherwise, not required. But in general, in the application development, max we are going to use class path resource. In any next level, we may go for like what there? File system resource. But before that, one point I am telling there, utilization of bean factory is very, very less. Utilization of bean factory in our application development is very, very less. Max every application we are going to use application context. In every application we are going to use what there? Application context. Bean factory is very less. In that bean factory also, like all the remaining resources are not going to be utilized. Max class path resource or maybe file system resource. Only these two things only here we are able to use. Okay, now these are the points here we given there. Then we created an object. Resource is equal to new class path resource. Then the total class path here we have to specify. That means the location, name and location of the configuration file. Then we created bean factory with resource object. Then after we are getting bean object. After getting this bean object, then we can access the respective methods. Business methods here we have to access. How we are able to access that business method here? String message is equal to hello bean dot say hello. If we think say hello is a business method that is available inside this hello bean, then we can access it directly. Then we are able to get some string message. We are able to get some string message. That's it. Now this is exactly the meaning of like what there. The steps to use that bean factory in our classes. I think so. I given one example already. Have I prepared any example on the basis of this bean factory? I think so. We have seen that. Now, guys, now maybe in our classes I may use IntelliJ IDEA or I may go for Eclipse. Either of the things parallel I'm going to use there. But in our comfortable, you can use either of this IDE. Whatever the IDE is comfortable for you, then we can use that. But as per my responsibility, I'm going to work with multiple IDEs there. After introducing that Maven, see, definitely within few days I will start Maven. Why? Because we are going to prepare applications with Maven. After introducing this Maven, I may use either Eclipse or I may go for IntelliJ IDEA or maybe I may introduce NetBeans also. In NetBeans also we are able to prepare applications. That one also I will introduce there. But if you want to use NetBeans directly, we need Maven. Without Maven, not possible to use NetBeans. In the older versions of the NetBeans, we can prepare the applications without Maven. Now in NetBeans, Maven is mandatory even for core Java programs also. That's why I'm not discussing about NetBeans immediately. But in the future, when I complete these Maven concepts, no, then I will go for NetBeans. There we are able to understand them. Right, sir. Now observe carefully here what we are discussing there. See, if you observe this application now, student bean here we have taken. Inside the student bean, how many properties here we have taken there? 4 properties we have taken: SID, SName, SEmail, and SMobile. Setters and getters also we generated. After generating that, next one is what there, get a student details method I have taken, where I displayed all the student details. Okay. Next one is like what there, Spring a configuration file I have taken. So beans, inside this beans, bean tag we have taken. In bean tag, ID, class, that means ID is a std bean, class is a fully qualified name of the student, then properties we provided and data also here we provided, everything we provided clearly. And then after that, test application here we have taken. Inside this test application, resource is equal to new class path resource, and the total information here we provided. Then bean factory object also here we created. Then we got that student object from the bean factory. Then we are accessing that business method. That's like what there, student dot get bean details, get student details. So then we can execute this program. There we are able to get some output also. Already we understood clearly, some output also here we are able to get if we execute this particular program. Right, sir? There we can see the total student details. Output we are getting student details, student ID, student name, student email, and student mobile. Up to this part we understood. Am I right or not? But what exactly the internal flow of this particular program? I want to know that. Internal flow of execution here I want to provide. Try to put more concentration here. Here, next 10 to 15 minutes of time, the topic is very, very important. Try to put more concentration. Previously, you might be see application context flow of execution. We have not seen bean factor. Now I'm going to discuss about bean factor information. Try to understand it, all of you know. Right. First of all, I want to provide test application here. Inside this test application, what we have to do there, or resource is equal to new class path resource of directly. I'm going to specify what there, spring config dot xml. Of course, I can provide like what there, directly that name and location of this particular one. I can use this directly specified spring config dot xml, but there we can specify com slash Durgasoft slash, the total name and location we can specify. But for our explanation point of view, I give directly name, configuration file name. This is resource object that what we created. Okay. Next one is after that, after creating that, next one is what there, it will create bean factory. Bean factory, and bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory of resource. Okay. Now here, this one also here I want to provide new XML bean factory of resource. That's okay. Then after that, now here I want to get like what there, hello bean only I want to use there. Hello bean is equal to bean factory dot get bean of, here the ID attribute value is like what there, hello bean. So now here what we have to specify there, this is the code. Like this here we are having some instructions. All of you observe carefully. This is our client application. Okay. Test application. Now what I am telling to you after this, here we are having Spring configuration file. Spring config.xml, where inside this what we are having there, beans tag is available. Then inside this beans tag, bean tag is available. ID is equal to hello bean. Okay. Then after this, class is equal to fully qualified name of the respective hello bean class is existed here. I want to use some shortcuts here. ID is equal to something. Next one is a class is equal to something else dot hello bean. Okay, and a slash beans. Like this Spring config.xml file is existed. That's okay. This is Spring configuration file. This is test application. Right, observe carefully. Next one is here what I am telling there. Here we are able to have bean class. What is this bean class actually? You can observe this. Okay, and directly I want to take a bean class. Hello bean class is existed. Hello bean. Inside this hello bean, then what we are having there? Some properties I have taken there. Name is one property. Then set, comma, get methods. Both are existed here. Set methods and as well as like what there? Get methods. Then after that, there is a business method. What is this business method here? No, right? Str say hello. That business method is existed here. Now here some implementation part is also existed. And finally, here we have to close this. This is my hello bean class is available. Of course, student bean or hello bean, both are same here in this case. No, just I have taken the content in the form of hello bean, not more than that. Okay, fine. Now let's observe carefully. Let us understand this clearly. Here, this is a JVM. This is a JVM. Understand? You have to understand clearly that internal content here. This is a JVM. Then after that, okay. When I start execution of this particular program, first JVM will encounter which in a section here resource res is equal to new class path resource where spring config.xml. When JVM execute this particular in a section, what JVM is doing no? What JVM is doing no? Observe carefully. JVM is just creating a resource object, an empty resource object. JVM is creating just what is it no? An empty resource object. Okay, where it is creating that empty resource object here? Here. This is the resource object created by JVM. Empty resource object. Inside this empty resource object, parameter is also be stored. What is that parameter? Spring configuration file. Okay, available. Assume it inside the resource object that name and location of the like Spring configuration file is existed. That's okay. Resource object is created. Next one. After executing this particular one, JVM will come to what? Bean factory. Bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory of RES. Bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory of RES. We provide RES is what? The resource object. Now bean factory container will be activated. Now which container is activated? Bean factory container is activated. Okay, with this is bean factory container. Bean factory container is activated. This is bean factory. Bean factory is activated. From which line here? From this particular line, bean factory is activated. what this bean factory container will do now, as a first step, directly it will go to resource object, where it will take name and location of the configuration file. It will go to resource object where it will take a name and location of the configuration file. Okay, after getting that, what it will able to do now, it will identify spring config.xml file. Then immediately what it will do there, when it has taken spring configuration file. One minute guys, let me redraw this diagram a little bit. No, everything is right, but I want to give more clarity. Here resource object is created. Then first of all, container, that means bean factory, will take some spring configuration file name and location from this resource object. Then it will identify spring config.xml in the specified location. First of all, it will check whether the spring configuration file is existed or not. If the spring configuration file is not existed, there we are able to get file not found exception. If a spring configuration file is existed, then what it able to perform, then it able to perform loading configuration file. Then after loading configuration file, next one is parsing configuration file. What is the meaning of parsing configuration file, guys? Now tell me. The meaning of parsing configuration file is checking whether all the XML tags are properly provided or not, whether all the attributes are properly provided inside this XML file or not. That everything will be checked here. So what two steps are taken here? First one is like what there, loading, and next one is like what there, parsing. Then after parsing, then what next step here? Reading beans configuration from XML file, from configuration file. Now this is like what I'm telling to you, reading data. This is like what I'm telling to you, reading data. Observe carefully. Whenever we are reading the data, when we read the data, the total configuration details will be stored. The total configuration details will be stored. Total configuration details will be stored in a Spring configuration file. Total configuration data will be stored in what there? Spring configuration, that means resource object, not in configuration file. Whatever the data which we read from the configuration file, the data will be stored inside the resource object. Now we can observe this clearly. Inside this resource object, bean tag information will be stored. Inside this bean ID, then what next one here? Fully qualified name of the respective bean class, and every information will be provided inside like what there, inside the respective resource object. Let me check once again here what exactly the points here I'm telling to you. Listen, up to this point, listen carefully. Easily we can understand it. No, still my program application is not completed. Now try to understand this clearly. First of all, when JVM executes resource object, which object is created here? No, just empty resource object is created. Inside this resource object, configuration file name is stored. What is the configuration file name here? Spring config.xml, name and location. After that, then what next one can know? When JVM execute this bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory of RES. Immediately bean factory container will be activated. What this bean factory is doing there? Bean factory is taking resource object from the parameter. Then where bean factory will go to the resource object, where it will get the Spring configuration file name. When it is getting the Spring configuration file name, it will search for the Spring configuration file at the specified location. If a Spring configuration file is not existed, there we are able to get an exception. That exception would be like what there? File not found exception. In the case, if a Spring configuration file is existed here, if it is available, then bean factory container will load XML file into the memory. After loading that, it will parsing that XML file. Parsing in the sense checking all the tags are properly provided or not. Then after parsing this XML file now, immediately it will read all the beans configurations from the Spring configuration file. Then all the beans configuration details will be stored inside the resource object. So up to now resource object is created with the all bean configuration details. Got my point or not? Okay. Then after that, what next one here? Resource object is created. Inside this resource object, all the bean configuration details are provided. Please remember this. Still, bean factory container is not creating any object for any bean. Just it is getting all the configuration details from XML file to resource object. That's it. Bean factory is not creating objects for any bean as of now. Just it is reading all the configuration details from Spring configuration file. That details are going to be available inside the resource object. Yes, all of you are getting my point or not? Okay, right now. Listen carefully. All of you listen carefully. After that, after completion of this particular one, when JVM encounter this in a section, hello bean is equal to bean factory dot get bean of hello bean. Okay, when JVM encounter this particular intersection, now immediately bean factory dot get bean method we are calling there. Then immediately JVM is requesting bean factory to get a particular bean object. Am I right or not? Of course, already after completing its total process there, after completion of this total resource configurations now, before executing this one, here bean factory object will be created. Which object is created? You know, bean factory object is created. That means object in the sense it's a container. Now bean factory container is created. Empty container is created. So far no data is available. Okay, fine. Then after that, when JVM executes hello bean is equal to bean factory dot get bean method, get bean of hello bean, then a request will be submitted to bean factory about to get this particular bean object. Now what bean factory now it will do, because of this get bean method, get bean of hello bean, what bean factory will do now, again bean factory will interact with the resource object. Inside this resource object, bean factory will search for the bean configuration with the ID value is a hello bean. ID value is what there, hello bean, already that hello bean and its a fully qualified name is identified here. It will search for the respective bean configuration details in the resource object. After getting the details from this resource object, then bean factory will search for a bean class with the same name hello bean. With the same name hello bean. All of you guys observe carefully. Bean factory, what bean factory will do there? Bean factory will search for hello bean dot class file in the specified location. Already fully qualified name is existed here. If you want to understand clearly that point here, we can observe this clearly. Hello bean is an identity. This identity is having like what there? Hello bean class is existed here. Then on the base of hello bean, it will search for the bean configuration. Bean configuration is available where fully qualified name of the bean class is available. That bean class will be taken by this bean factory and search for its dot class file in the respective Spring application. Fully qualified name is available for bean class. When a bean class is identified, when bean class dot class file is identified by bean factory, then immediately bean factory container will load. Bean factory container will load this hello bean class to the memory. So loading that bean class to the memory is nothing but bean loading. Then what is the meaning of this bean factory? Bean loading this particular bean class? No, bean loading that bean class. Whenever it is loading that bean class, then immediately it is trying to create an object for the respective bean. It is trying to create an object for the respective bean. Creating object for the respective bean is nothing but what there? Bean instantiation. Bean instantiation. Whenever this bean instantiation is completed, after completion of this bean instantiation, next the total bean object will be stored inside the container along with the ID attribute value. That bean object, whatever the bean object which is created there, that bean object will be stored inside the container along with the id attribute value. Id attribute value is like what there? Hello bean. It will be mapped here. Simply it is a map. In the collection framework, map is available. No? It is a map. In the form of key value base, the data will be stored. So here hello bean is an ID name. Now here this is like what they know, hello bean object. Both are stored inside this container. After creating this hello bean object, after storing inside the container, now what container will do? Now container hello bean object will be written to this particular hello bean reference kernel. That means hello bean object reference is available to this hello bean. Whenever this reference is available to hello bean, there we can access our say hello method. There we are able to get our required response. That's it, guys. Now this is what exactly the flow of execution here we can understand. Now I want to give some numberings there. Try to understand this numbering clearly. Easily we can understand the content here. Try to understand this. Then what is the first step here now? When JVM executes this particular resource object, automatically a resource object will be created by JVM or not? This is an empty resource object. After creating that empty resource object, then JVM will come to bean factory. Now here bean factory will be activated. Then after activating this bean factory, then what next one it will do there? Then here it will get resource object. Then from this resource object, it able to get like what there? Name and location of the Spring configuration file. Then it will search for name and location of the Spring configuration file. If it is available, then it will perform like what there? Like a Spring configuration file loading, Spring configuration file parsing, and reading the data from the Spring configuration file and storing the data inside the respective Spring configuration file. That means Spring configuration file parsing, Spring configuration file reading, and keeping the data into like what there no resource object. Only configuration details are available. Okay, after completion of this particular one, what next one you know? Just resource object is created. Inside this resource object, that all the bean configuration details are provided. Okay, then after that, when JVM execute this hello bean is equal to bean factory dot get bean of hello bean. Now JVM is requesting the bean factory about to get this hello bean object. As per that, then what next one you know? Now this is like what I am telling there. Ninth step, that is JVM is requesting for bean factory about to get bean object. Now what bean object will do there? Now here as a 10th step, and bean factory will go to the resource object where it will search for the bean configurations on the basis of the provided parameter. Then if any bean object is available, then it will search for its respective class, their bean class. Then it able to perform bean loading. Then after that bean instantiation. After completion of this bean instantiation, the total bean object will be stored inside the container. Total bean object will be stored inside the container. Storing bean object inside the container. Container is what they know. That is nothing but the bean factory only. Then not only that, now inside this container that hello bean and hello bean, that means the total bean object is stored along with its logical name. Then after that, the same hello bean data will be assigned to the JVM. Now JVM will take that value will be stored in hello bean. After that, we can access any business method over the hello bean. Say hello method we can call. By that, we are able to get some output. Guys, all of you are getting my point or not? See, I am ready to prove each and every statement here in our program. This is a total flow of execution. All of you are following or not? Can I go for some practical proofs over all these points now? I can show some practical proofs for it. Then by that we are able to get some clarity, right? Okay, fine. Now let's see this one. If you understand this, that bean factory, I will show each and every point clearly. 1 minute. Right. All of you observe carefully. Right here we are having the program. This is a program here we are having there. Observe carefully. I want to provide some pinpoints. Now here I want to say as out. What I want to say there, a resource object is created. Okay. Then after that, I want to pass my flow of execution. system.out.println, sorry, system.in.read. System.in.read. Okay. It will throw some exception here, throws exception. That's okay, fine. Sys.in.read in the sense it will stop flow of execution until we click on enter button. It will pass the flow of execution until we click on enter button. Okay, that is one point here. Next one is what I want to specify there. Bean factory is equal to new XML bean factory of resource. Now here what I am telling there, sout bean factory container is created. Then here I want to go for system.in.read method. This is one point. Then here I want to pass my flow of execution there. Then after that, after completion of this, then what next one here? Student bean factory dot get bean, student bean that we provided here. So here we are able to get some student details also. Now here what I want to say there, sout here what I want to there getting student bean object with a get bean method. Then after that, here I will provide system.in.read method. Then the remaining thing is what? Just we are displaying the data. Okay. Then when bean object is going to be created, I want to say that information here. So here what I will do now, public student constructor here I want to take. Now here I want to say sout. Here I want to say like what there, student bean instantiation. That means student bean object is created. Student bean object is created. Instantiation. Right. These are the various things here we applied clearly. I want to execute it one by one, all the conclusions here we have to understand. But meanwhile, first attempt, what I'm trying to say there, in a tester.java, first listen carefully, in tester.java, intentionally, I made a mistake in my Spring configuration file. Or maybe Durgasoft is okay. Spring config, no. Like this I provided. Some mistake I have done. Mistake I have done in the sense, definitely we are able to get some exception or not. Then file not found exception or maybe some configuration file related exception here we have to get. Observe carefully when we are able to get this exception. Observe carefully. Is that at the time of creating resource object or at the time of creating bean factory object? At what time we are getting exception? That we have to analyze. After that, we will go for next conclusions. Let me execute this program here. I started execution of this program here. Now observe carefully, resource object is created or not? Resource object is created in the sense, which resource object is created here? Empty resource object is created. But in the program, if you observe there, guys, all of you observe clearly, in the program, resource is equal to new class path resource of the total Spring configuration file. Spring configuration file name and location we have given. Am I right or not? So the point what I'm telling there, if a resource object is loading the content of the configuration file to the resource object, here itself we have to get file not found exception. Resource object is getting all the configuration details from Spring configuration file. In the sense, here itself we have to get what they know, we have to get exception, file not found exception. But we are not getting file not found exception. What JVM has done there, simply creating resource object, inside this resource object, which stores name and location of the configuration file. That's it. Resource object is not responsible for searching for configuration file, parsing configuration file, and loading configuration file, getting data from configuration file. Now resource object is not responsible for it. Who will take this configuration file? Who will load this configuration file? Who will parse configuration file? And who will read the content from configuration file? No, bean factory is responsible for it. But as of now, just we taken like what they know, only resource object we created, empty resource object, where just name and location of the Spring configuration file is stored. So because of that reason only, in our program, what we are getting here now, just a resource object is created. Resource object is created in the sense, resource is not checking our Spring configuration file, whether it is existed or not existed. Yes, sir. Am I right or not? All right. Hello. 1 minute. Hello. Hello. Right, sir. So here, what I'm telling now, resource object is not responsible for loading, parsing, reading the content from Spring configuration file. Just resource object is created by JVM with an empty, where file name and location is saved. Because of that reason only, in the output, what we are getting there, resource object is created. After executing this in a section only, we executed this. Resource object is created in the sense, just only empty object is created. Understand my point here? So once again, I'm giving clarity for you. Who is responsible to load XML file? Who is responsible to read the data from the XML file? Who is responsible to keep the data inside the bean factory? Inside, who is responsible for that? To store that configuration details into the resource object? No, bean factory is responsible for that. Not resource object. Just empty resource object is created. Okay. Now observe carefully. I'm going to click on enter button. Next section will be executed. What is that next section? Can you observe carefully? Bean factory. That is the next section. Now observe carefully. If I click on enter button, now we are getting exception. If I click on enter button, now we are getting exception. What is that exception here we are getting there? Observe carefully. Right, sir. Bean definition exception here we are getting. Right, IO exception. Parsing XML document from class path resource com Durgasoft 07 config spring config.xml. Nested exception is IO exception, file not found exception. Got my point or not? IO exception, file not found exception. Now tell me, you only tell me. Who is loading Spring configuration file? Who is parsing Spring configuration file? Who is reading the data from the Spring configuration file? Is that resource object or bean factory? Bean factory is doing. But resource object is empty, resource object is created here. Bean factory is doing the total work. Okay, fine. Okay, now this time what I'm trying to do now, I want to give right information in the Spring configuration file. Now I want to provide like what their config.xml. Guys, observe carefully. Once again, observe carefully this program here. First we are creating resource object, empty resource object where name and the location of the configuration file is existed. That's okay. Next, what we are creating there now, bean factory object is created. Whenever bean factory object is created, what is going to be happen there internally? Then bean factory will take a configuration file name and location from resource object, search for configuration file, loading configuration file, parsing configuration file, reading data from configuration file, storing the data into the resource object. Now resource object contains all the configuration data. After completion of this, after that, bean factory container is also be created. Bean factory will maintain a map internally. Inside this map, it has to store all the bean objects along with their logical name. But so far, empty container object will be created. Here also be container object is what? Empty. But all the configuration details are available inside the resource object. Then after that, when we request for the bean by calling get bean method, when we request to the container by calling get bean method, now bean factory will go to the resource object where it will search for the bean object on the base of this logical name, student bean. Okay, then it will get it whenever it is identifying bean class. Now it is trying to load bean class bytecode to the memory. Now it is trying to create object for the bean. Now it is keeping that object inside like what there, inside the map, inside the container, along with its logical name, that is student bean. Then student object will be provided inside the container along with its logical name, that is ID attribute value, that is the std bean. So that bean object will be created whenever we are requesting for the bean. Bean object is not created while creating bean factory. Student bean is not created while creating bean factory. Student bean is created while calling get bean method. That means on demand bean factory is providing our objects. If no request is submitted by the user, then bean factory will not create object for the bean. When bean factory will create object for the bean, when we request for the bean. If we are not requested for that bean object will not be created by bean factory. Even that point also I want to be specified. No, try to understand when a bean object is created. In this moment, when bean object is creating, try to understand this clearly. Now, to understand that bean object creation, one minute, sir. 1 minute, 1 minute. Right, sir. Hello. Right. To understand this bean object creation, what I have done here, I open the student now, where I have taken a constructor. Inside this constructor, what I have given there now, student object, student bean initialization, that information will be provided. Now observe this, at what time the student bean initialization is happened? Is that at the time of creating bean factory or at the time of calling get bean method? At the time of creating bean factory or at the time of calling get bean method, at what time that bean factory is created, that we have to understand. Let's observe this clearly. Total flow of execution, understand this one. Now I want to execute this test application again, run it. All of you observe this clearly. What it is created, sir? Resource object is created. Empty resource is created with the file and name and location, configuration file name location. Let me click on enter button. Right, sir. I think so. It has taken some time internally. No. Once again, I'm going to execute it. Stop on written. Once again, let me execute it. I think it's a problem with ID, not with us. No. Resource object is created. Now here, what we are getting there now? Tell me. Bean factory container is created, but we are not getting any output like student bean is creating. That means bean factory object is created. Bean factory object is created, just it is loading Spring configuration file details to resource object. So far, bean object is not created. Student bean object is not created. Get my point or not? In the case of application context, what happened? At the time of creating application context itself, all bean objects are created. But here in the case of bean factory, at the time of creating bean factory, no bean object is created. Just it is loading all the configuration details into the resource object. Okay, next one. After that, click on enter button. Next one here. Now, whenever we are calling get bean method, now bean object initialization is performed. Whenever we are calling get bean method, now only we are getting what the student bean initialization is performed. That means bean factory is creating bean objects on demand or not? On demand in the sense, as per the user request only, bean factory is creating bean objects. Otherwise, it is not creating any bean object by default or predefinedly or at the time of creating container. Whenever we are requesting for the bean, then only bean object is creating. That's okay. Now it is getting student bean object with a get bean method. By the time only bean object instantiation is performed. Next one is after that, if we click on enter button, remaining all the student details will be displayed. That's it. Now this is the total internal flow of like what there of this like bean factory container. Sir, all of you are understanding this internal flow? See, this is very, very important. Understanding Concepts normally is okay, but understanding with internals is very, very important. If you are getting much clarity about this bean factory, in the future, we will not get any problem. Damn sure I'm telling to you, maybe every interview will ask one question to you. Tell me the difference between application context and bean factory. Even in our class also, we are going to discuss about it. Tell me the differences between bean factory and application context, where we are going to understand, we are going to provide very good answers there. But to provide answers now, we have to understand this total internals of this bean factory. Right, sir. Now this is the total diagram here, we can understand. I will share this document, don't worry for it. Right, sir. By this, we understood clearly what their bean factory point here we understood. Next one, tell me guys, I have shown only what I shown there, no class path resource only I shown. Am I right or not? What about this file system resource? No, remaining concepts are not required. Remaining concepts are not required. Just max we are able to use class path resource, or in the worst case we are going to use like what there file system resource. Okay, now let me use that file system resource also. What is this file system resource here? In place of this class path resource, can I use directly file system resource? No, directly. Now here I want to provide like what there resource is equal to new. Then what you have to provide there file system resource. Can I use that file system resource there? There we have to specify the name and location of the file or not. Okay, in IDEs up to SRC folder location will be in a class path. Up to SRC folder, that location up to SRC location, it will be in a class path. Inside this SRC, if we prepare any package structure, from that package onwards we have to provide to specify the resource. That is in general in a class path resource. Now the same thing I'm trying to apply inside this file system resource. What it is going to be happen? Com slash what next one here? No, Durgasoft slash. Then what next one here? app07 slash. Then what next one here? No, config slash. Then what next one here? Now tell me spring config.xml. Okay, com slash Durgasoft slash app07 slash config slash spring config.xml. This is what we provided. Now tell me what we are using there, class path resource or file system resource? Now file system resource we are using, but in the file system resource we are given name and location of the file, but by providing from com onwards, by providing from what there com onwards. Let me execute this point here, what we are able to get now. To execute this particular one, these logs are not required. Just I want to close these logs. Not required to show this. Just for the sake of your information, I shown that previously. Now not required here. All right, my program is ready. Now let me execute this one. What we are able to get here. Now try to understand it. Click on this run button here. Program will run. Then program is able to provide some output. Now here we are getting an exception or not? Please read out this exception, guys. What we are getting there? Exception in thread main arg.spring framework.beans.factory. Then what we are getting there now, observe carefully. Bean definition store exception, create breakpoint. That's okay, fine. Next one is like what there? Ioc exception, parsing XML document from file. This one D frameworks spring IntelliJ projects app07 where com Durgasoft app07. See, observe this clearly. Again, what we are getting there? app07 com Durgasoft. Again, app07 config spring config.xml. Getting problem or not? Okay, then this is XML file. Actually, nested exception is what there? File not found exception it is providing. Com Durgasoft app07 config spring config.xml. File not found exception we are getting. Anyway, file is not found. I will give solution for it. What is the solution here? Listen carefully. When we provide like this, in the case of file system resource no, bean factory container needs the total absolute path of the file. Bean factory required which part of the file? No, absolute path of the file, not the relative path. This is relative path. Right from up to right from source, right from SRC we are giving this. We thought of his SRC is available in the class path. So from this, that means JVM or maybe bean factory container will come to the SRC through class path. Then after that, it will take this path. That's okay. But now we are not using class path resource. We are using what their file system resource. So we have to provide the total file, total absolute path of the file. What is that absolute path of the file here? We have to provide there. Now let's observe this clearly. Absolute path of the file is what? Open that directory. Inside this directory, where I stored all my applications there, D drive. Inside this D drive frameworks, Spring. Inside this IntelliJ projects, no? Inside this IntelliJ project, what is my application there? ABB07, double click. Now inside this SRC, COM, Durgasoft, ABB07, config. Here it is available or not? Spring config.xml is existed or not existed? Let me copy this total location, total address I copied here, Control C, coming to this one. Now simply in place of this total, in place of this COM Durgasoft ABB0, in place of this, I have to type the total information. Total path, absolute path, right from scratch. D:// frameworks / Spring IntelliJ projects ABB07 SRC COM Durgasoft ABB07. Then after that, what next one here? No, here I need to change this slash also, double slashes. Spring config.xml. This is a file system. The total absolute path of the file here we have taken. Now let me run this example here by providing like this. Now resource object is created here. Now okay, let me execute this. If I execute this here, we are able to get like what there. Definitely we are able to get some output. We are getting output. So if we are using file system resource, then what we have to specify there? Absolute path of the file we have to specify. The total address of the file we have to specify. But if you are using class path resource now, what we have to specify? Just we have to think up to SRC folder is in class path now. From that, whatever the path is available, that we have to provide. Maybe interviewer may ask a question to you. What is the difference between class path resource and file system resource? What is your answer here? No. In the case of class path resource, just we have to specify the relative location from SRC. Relative location, name and location, relative location of the relative URL of the file from what they know, SRC. In the case of class path, here the thinking is what? SRC folder is in class path. So bean factory will come to the SRC through class path. Then after that, as per our given location there, then it will come to that location. That is class path resource. But if we want to use file system resource now, where class path will not work out, then bean factory will search for the Spring configuration file by searching right from the root folder. Directly it will search from the root folder. That means D drive onwards. D drive, where right from workspace onwards. In our workspace onwards, the total path, the total absolute path we have to provide. Like what there, D:/ and the frameworks / Spring / IntelliJ projects / then inside this ABB07 / COM / Durgasoft / next one is what there. After this, the Durgasoft ABB07 / config / the Spring config.xml. That is the difference between class path and as well as like what their file system resource. No. Okay, fine. The topic here we understood clearly. Right, so now this is the overall story about, this is the overall story of bean factory. This is the overall content of like what their bean factory. Leave this one. Right, sir. After completion of this bean factory and all these concepts now, second type of container is what there? Second type of container is what there? Application context. Two types of containers are available in Spring. What are the two types of containers now? Bean factory and application context. Now we understood clearly bean factory. And once again, I'm telling to you, after completion of this class, maybe video will be available. Try to check that video one time to understand betterly the total flow of execution. Now we have to understand application context. Tell me some points about this application context here. Some points about application context just by comparing bean factory. Now tell me some points about application context. It is a child container of bean factory. Am I right or not? What is this? No, it is a child of bean factory. Bean factory is a base for all. Application context is an extension of the bean factory, not more than that. It is a child container of bean factory. Okay, that is one point. Next one is what it able to provide. What differences are available? That means what bean factory is not providing, what application context is providing. Bean factory is not supporting AOP module in Spring Framework and web applications. And the next one is some advanced features like what there, advanced features like internationalization, event propagation, and validations. This kind of things are not possible with Bean factory. But application context can provide all capabilities of Bean factory as well as some advanced features like what there, this internationalization, event propagation, and all the things here we are able to get. Now observe carefully. Application context container is able to have all the capabilities of Bean factory and 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 some other advanced features like internationalization, comma, then after that what next one here, event handling, and so on and so on and so on. That's these many things here we can understand clearly. Of course, again I will talk about these points here while differentiating Bean factory and application context. But time being, I'm telling to you clearly. Next one is application context will be utilized in Spring AOP modules, comma, web module, comma, transactions module, and so on. Transaction module, and so on. All the advanced modules we are going to use like what their application context. This is another one. Right, sir. Then after that, Bean factory will be utilized for standalone applications. Bean factory will be utilized for what application? There standalone applications, but application context will be utilized or used for all the types of applications. Okay, some other points, some other differences are available. In the differences concept, I will discuss about all the points here. Differences between Bean factory and application context, there I will give much more information, but this information is sufficient about this application context. But how this application context is represented? How application context is represented? And one more point, before that I want to say one more point. Application context is able to create all Bean objects at the time of creating container. At the time of creating container only, it able to create all the Bean objects. This is another difference actually. In the case of Bean factory, Bean objects are created on demand. When we request, then only Bean object is created. But in the case of application context, without our request, without submitting our request, Bean objects are created by application context at the time of creating application context. As part of creating application context only, all the Bean objects are created. Right, sir. This is one point. Next one is, right, sir, to represent this application context, Spring Framework has provided an interface, has provided a predefined interface in the form of course, I'm not specifying fully qualified name, just we can understand like what there, application context, arc.springframework.io.context. I think some fully qualified name is available, not required to remember that. Directly, when we type this application context in our might be ID, automatically fully qualified name here we are able to get. Okay, now to represent application context container, Spring Framework has provided a predefined interface in the form of application context and the following implementation classes. Application context is an interface, but its implementation classes are also be provided by Spring Framework. What are these implementation classes there? First one is like what there, class path XML application context, class path XML application context. Second one is file system XML application context, file system XML application context, and third one is web XML application context. That's it. As of now, 3 implementation classes are available, but sub interfaces are available for application context. Different interfaces are available, but I don't require that sub interfaces now. Mainly, which implementation class are existed for this application context? Class path XML application context, file system application context. Next one is like what there, web XML application context. Now let me show in a diagram here how this total architecture is existed here. Now let me show this total point here. Yeah, configurable application context and like different application contexts are available. They're the child interface of this application context, but direct implementation classes for application context are these only. Observe carefully. I want to show some representation to try to follow this. Initially, we are having bean factory. Initially, we had what there? Bean factory. Now, okay. Now, here for this bean factory, some other things are existed here. First one is like what there? XML bean factory. XML bean factory. This is an interface and this is a class. Here the relationship is like what there implements. Okay. Then after that, after completion of this, here we are having a child interface for bean factory. The child interface is like what there? Application context. Application context. Now get this is also be an interface. Now get what we are having there. This is like what there extends. For this application context, number of for this application context here we are having number of implementation classes and sub interfaces are also be existed. Number of sub interfaces are also be existed. But I'm not moving to the sub interfaces here. When time comes for us, there I will discuss about this content here. Now here what we are getting there now, class path XML application context, class path XML application context. Next one is after this file system XML application context. Okay. Next one is web XML application context. Right, sir. As of now, these many application, that means implementation class are available, but sub interface are available for this application context. Different like configurable application context and annotation config application context, like maybe annotation config application context, right? Then apart from that, different child interface are available for this application context. Then we are not going to use them immediately. Whenever, definitely we are going to use that. shutdown hook, maybe abstract application context, something is available, like different XML, so different application contexts, implementation class are existed. That means the child interface are available. But as of now, we can understand this is the total diagram about like what no containers. Now here also be what we are able to say here. This is a class, and this is what there again a class, and this is like what there a class. Here the relationship is like what there. Here we can understand implements here, and here also here we can understand like what there implements. Then after that, after completion of this, here also here we can understand like what there implements. That's it. So these are about like what the total diagram for containers, IOC containers. Here we can understand now. Okay. Right, sir. Next one is we need to prepare an example, simple example for application context. There we have to understand that internal flow of this application context. Right. Then after that we will go for the differences between bean factory and application context. Okay. Can I discuss the topic on tomorrow? And time may not be sufficient for it. And tomorrow at what time you have to come here? Tomorrow Sunday, will you come or not? Okay. Yes. Monday, Sunday. Depending on your option, I'm asking there. If you want to practice these examples, you can take time tomorrow. Otherwise, no, sir, I want to come for this class in the sense, just it's okay. Then I will take the session. I don't have any problem. Regular session only I'm taking there. Sunday, we want class, sir. Please. Right, sir. Sir, what is IOC? We know what is container, but what is IOC? Inversion of control. IOC stands for inversion of control, just as the name only. But inversion of control design pattern we'll discuss there. Next, after completion of this inversion of control, we are going to understand. Why the name is coming also, I will discuss with you. Don't worry. Tomorrow fix, right? Same time max. Tomorrow fix, right? Okay. Come at 11:30. I will take the session. Sure. So one session only. 11:30 is okay. Or you want to come at earlier mode or same 11:30? Time is okay. Same time, right? 11:30 to 1. Okay, sir. Right. Thank you. Then we'll meet on tomorrow. Same 11:30. Thank you. Guys, and same 11:30. I'll take it. No, you can come. Yeah, Abhishek. Then I'll discuss with you. That is a P namespace. Maybe other content is available. Then I'll give that information, Abhishek. Don't worry. Then in the beans topic, I will discuss with you. There is a concept like a P namespace and a C namespace. All the concepts are available. Definitely, I'll discuss with that. Don't worry. Thank you. Yeah, it's okay, guys. Thanks a lot.